Dan and Amy, we just got a call from a listener.
Yeah.
Following up on that protest outside the Thompson Center yesterday. There is a anti-mask protest in Elmhurst at Emerson Elementary School in Elmhurst from 7:30 to 8:30 this morning.
Yep. Again, that's Emerson Elementary in Elmhurst, because this kid has been sitting in the vice principal's office for 3 weeks now because he refuses to wear a mask, and so they're denying him an education.
Free Johnny over at Elmhurst Elementary, or whatever his name is. It persists, and they persist. Joe Biden offered his interpretation of the results in Virginia on Tuesday night, the victory of Glenn Youngkin and his entire slate. This is what the president had to say. This is what happened.
Yeah, it's common.
Do you think that Terry McAuliffe would have won if your agenda had passed before Election Day?
Well, I think we should have passed before Election Day, but I'm not sure that I would be able to have changed the number of very conservative folks who turned out in the red districts who were Trump voters, but maybe.
And then he tried to spin the numbers. Like, we lost, but we also won.
I was talking to Terry to congratulate him today. He got 600,000 more votes than any Democrat ever has gotten. We brought out every Democrat about there was, more votes than ever has been cast for a Democratic incumbent. I'm not incumbent, a Democrat running for governor. And no governor in Virginia has ever won when he's of the same, or he or she's the same party as the sitting president. What I do know is, that people want us to get things done.
Yeah, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's tough to reconcile those two statements because this great turnout that they had. Well, Fairfax County, which is the largest county in Virginia, went by 10 points for Terry McAuliffe. The problem is that that was well under the 25 points it went for. I'm sorry, it's the opposite. I'm talking about Loudoun County. Fairfax County went for 25 points for Terry McAuliffe, the most populous county in Virginia. Okay. The problem was it went by 42 points for Joe Biden in November of last year. So no, there was that clearly wasn't just a matter of conservative turnout. It was clearly a matter of people that had voted for Joe Biden and were dyed-in-the-wool Democrats fleeing Terry McAuliffe. But this is Biden's general confusion this week. Earlier in the week, he was quite confused about what to do about inflation and who bears responsibility for inflation and what his message is to families who are seeing the cost of their Thanksgiving dinner spike.
For example, one of the reasons why I decided to talk about the need to deal with the operation and the gouging that occurs in some of the pricing of beef and chicken and other things is that that's why I think that's why I indicated to you we're going to look at whether or not there's a violation of antitrust laws and what they're doing. So there's a lot to look at, but the bottom line is that I think and anyone who would prefer, as bad as things are in terms of prices hurting families now, trade this Thanksgiving for last Thanksgiving.
Mr. President. So one, the issue of inflation is just a matter of beef and poultry producers colluding to artificially raise prices. That's his story.
And also, he has no idea about. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
And the other matter here too is trading this Thanksgiving for last Thanksgiving. Oh, you mean last Thanksgiving when you and your COVIDian friends were, led by Tony Fauci, were telling people they can't spend Thanksgiving with their family, and if they do, don't hug mom or dad. Yeah, we wouldn't trade this Thanksgiving for last Thanksgiving, but it's the same problem. It's policies of you and your leftist friends. It's whether it's lockdown or whether it's funny money spend that is driving inflation.
And a lot of people listened and didn't, cancel Thanksgiving last year. And then there's this, though. So Pete Ducey over there at Fox News Channel asked him about, this $450,000 payment.
Hey.
You don't want to hear it?
Go ahead.
Okay.
As you were leaving for your overseas trip, there were reports that were surfacing that your administration is planning to pay illegal immigrants who are separated from their families at the border up to $450,000 each, possibly $1 million per family. Do you think that that might incentivize more people to come over illegally?
If you guys keep sending that garbage out, yeah, but it's not true.
So this is a garbage report?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right hand's not talking to the left hand.
This $450,000 you said, well, what do you mean I said? That's the Wall Street Journal report. Are you unaware of this? That should have been the follow-up because it sounded like he was. So now back to Joe Manchin, because so much of this started with, in terms of interpreting the results from Tuesday, a conversation of, okay, did what you're trying to do negatively impact McAuliffe as well as Phil Murphy, even though he narrowly won? Joe Manchin, Biden saying, well, I can't say either way, except my agenda should pass. Of course, that's his position. Joe Manchin had a different interpretation. Brett Baer caught up with him.
Reconciliation bill, I think what it says is kind of slow down, take a breath. Let's look at this. We're talking about major tax overhaul, reform. We're talking about changing our energy policies. We're talking about a whole social rearrangement. We're talking about $29 trillion of debt. We better get our hands around it and be responsible. And I've always said, if you can't get your financial house in order, it's hard to do anything.
Mm-hmm. And Manchin also not raising the specter of oil companies colluding, and that's why the price at the pump has spiked so significantly. No, that's a direct result in terms of inflationary pressure on gas prices. That's a direct result of Joe Biden cutting off supply.
We can basically do more for ourselves. We've been energy independent for the first time in 67 years. Why can't we do more? Why can't we produce more? We've got plenty of natural gas. My state, beautiful state of West Virginia, has an ocean of natural gas under it. If they just let us build a pipeline, we could get the product to market. And why don't we do more drilling? And why don't we do more, basically, production in the United States? I'm not depending on OPEC. I'm not depending on other countries for my energy anymore. We know how to do it. We have the technology. We should be relying on ourselves.
So is the president wrong in that?
I have a difference of opinion.
Mm-hmm. Although, as I've cautioned before, I don't know how much stock faith you place in Joe Manchin when it comes ultimately to trillions more in spending, whether and the artifice that's being used to sort of pretend like they've moved off their $5 trillion number. That's really not happening. So we'll see if Joe Manchin holds fast. Perhaps if more Democrat socialist senators who fear their reelections next year fall in with Manchin and Sinema, then maybe you're starting to cook with fossil fuels. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Scott McKay, who's the publisher of the Hayride, and he's a contributor to The Spectator as well. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
You're someone else who is a little skeptical of Joe Manchin being the wingnut holding Western civilization together.
I would greatly prefer someone that was more trustworthy. But having said that, the fact that right next door to where he's from in West Virginia, you just had this avalanche may serve to motivate him properly. The thing about Joe Manchin is this guy is a politician's politician, and he's very, very good at putting his finger into the wind and kind of seeing which way it's blowing. And right now, I think he may be looking at this along the lines of, I'm politically dead if I go along with my party.
Well, what about Kristen?
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
What about Kristen Sinema? Is she going to hold fast? And where's she been? I haven't heard from her lately. Or we haven't heard from her.
Well, I mean, if I understand her position correctly, she doesn't want higher taxes. Right. She also is probably at the point where she doesn't want to vote for anything the Democrats want to do because she's so angry at how she's being treated back home in Arizona. I don't know, you guys, I'm sure, saw this whole thing about these protesters that showed up to destroy a wedding simply because she was officiating at
Right.
it. And the video of that is like just jaw dropping. I mean, the bride comes out and it's, "Hey guys, it's my wedding. Do you really want to destroy my wedding?" And then they spouted, left-wing bromides at her, and then did the same thing to the mother of the bride, who's like crying on video that's being taken by the protesters. And it's like, okay, I mean, this is not going to intimidate Kristen Sinema into doing what you want.
Yeah, the question,
and now you lose an election, you almost lose New Jersey, which nobody even thought was possible. These are two senators going to be up in 24, and if their interpretation is, oh, this means we've got to pass this, multi-trillion-dollar bacchanal that we're trying to get done, you're not going to persuade Manchin and Sinema that it's good for their political future to vote for this. I mean, you're just not going to do it. I mean, and I think it's almost a willful rejection of reality that you're seeing out of the Democrat Party. They have been gaslighting the American people on so many fronts for so long that I just don't think they're capable of a course correction at this point. And if you go back and you remember the Tea Party movement, 2009 was a little bit like this. It wasn't maybe quite as pronounced, but there were plenty of warning signs of what was going to happen in 2010, and the Democrats powered right through it all the way up to getting slaughtered in the midterms that year. And I just don't think that they have the ability to do what Bill Clinton did, when he took a bath in 93 and 94.
I wonder, though, if Republicans may want to pump the brakes on how much to take away from what happened in Loudoun and Fairfax counties in particular. And I go to Sean Trendy over at the Real Clear Politics, his analysis of the vote totals
right.
in New Jersey, which is actually even a little bit more interesting. He writes, from 2017, the biggest Republican gains came from Passaic City, Prospect Park, Woodland Park, Little Falls Township. These are among the most heavily Hispanic areas of the county, suggesting that Trump's 2020 gains may last without him on the ballot. From 2020, Hawthorne, Wayne, and Totowa townships moved the most against Democrats. The shift in blue-collar areas is consistent with continued movement toward Republicans among working-class whites. We should note again that the wealthier townships in the northwestern portion of the county showed more modest gains for Republicans compared to 2017 and 2020, which is consistent with the idea that the movement against Republicans in the wealthy suburbs from 2012 to 2020 is lasting. But so the point here is to say it was great that Youngkin was able to close the gap in wealthy suburban Northern Virginia. However, the real play for Republicans in 2022, 24, and beyond in terms of building a majority coalition in this country is not necessarily a wealthy suburban leftist, mainly women. It's blue-collar whites combined with defections among Hispanic voters to the Republican Party. That's really where the Republican Party butters its bread.
Yeah, I read it. I thought it was a good analysis, and I don't think he mentioned the fact that in Texas, the GOP flipped I think it's a 75% Hispanic House seat, state House seat in South and Southeast San Antonio, which has never bin Republican, and it is now. And of course, that's been happening in Texas a lot. Mm-hmm. And then I saw somewhere there was, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but Youngkin actually supposedly with white college-educated women did worse than Trump in Virginia, which I have a hard time believing because of the issues that dominated this thing were this mess in Loudoun County and the woke education and all this kind of stuff. You would think that college-educated white women would be coming home to the GOP with all of that going on, and that number kind of indicated that maybe it wasn't happening. I I don't know that we have enough information fully to understand whether this kind of wealthy suburban demographic is solidifying itself inside the Democrat Party, or if it was really just, they don't like mean tweets, and so Trump was going to underperform with them. I think we're going to need, the full midterm cycle to be able to really put that together. You would have thought Glenn Youngkin would be about as good a candidate as the GOP can put forth in order to get suburban, college-educated, upper middle class white women. That's an awfully specific demographic, however, and I do know that Youngkin got 57% of the white female vote in Virginia overall. So, I think I think that what happened in Virginia and in New Jersey are really, it's not even something that the GOP per se is doing. You had a truck driver that spent $153 on his whole campaign,
right,
take out the state Senate president in New Jersey who'd spent, $150,000 or something like this. And so really what it is you've got the public that is rejecting the Democrat Party. And I don't think the GOP has come up with a message quite yet for this. They certainly don't have like a contract for America like Newt Gingrich.
No, Kevin McCarthy's
had put together.
Kevin McCarthy's talking about a parent's bill of rights, but that's a little clunky. It sounds too political. It seems to me my concern, just to I guess articulate it more explicitly, is that the diluted top 15% quintile suburban college-educated women and male impersonators that they're married to, that is fool's gold. The real upside is upper middle down and enlisting the aspirational minority families in this country, Hispanics, blacks, aspirational families within those demographics too. And maybe the leading indicator will be how this movement against the indoctrination of kids in K through 12, how this continues to evolve over the next year and beyond. There was a good piece by a couple of guys from the Competitive Enterprise Institute about the American Enterprise Institute, excuse me, that the idea that the Republican Party and Glenn Youngkin, at least that play, made the Republican Party the parents' party, the party of the adults. And there's a 40-year-old woman from Charlottesville that spoke about this, that basically, she wants her kids to go to schools that have excellence in the basics, the 3 R's. And she's uncomfortable with teaching the whole range of equity-based political theories as the focus of K through 12 education. If you continue to see that move, then maybe that is something that Republicans can brand themselves as the parents' party, and frankly, the K through 12 party, the primary and secondary education party. You take that issue away from Democrats the way that Youngkin did, and they cannot win almost anywhere outside of a few states.
I think that's right. My idea has always been to go unionize the parents in public schools, because if you play that one out in your mind and what that would do to the dynamics, it would be awfully interesting. And that there have been kind of efforts, not particularly vigorous efforts made at doing that, mostly in minority communities. But, I think if you did that in the suburbs, you might really be cooking with gas. But, the other thing is school choice polls so well. And if you look at, very recently what's been going on within the educational marketplace, in a year, homeschooling went from 5% of the educational market to 11%. I wonder if maybe the thing to do is to just go really big on it and start pushing basically educational savings accounts all over the country.
Oh, absolutely.
Hey, money follows the kid, and if these people want to try to teach your kid critical race theory or transgenderism or whatever, then, you can hit the eject button and take the money with you and do, private school or, learning pods, micro schools, whatever it is. And, here's the money to fuel it. I mean, if you did that, you would break this, education complex that we have. I mean, you've got this sort of feeling in the GOP that, well, we can really win on this issue. But the problem is that issues come and go. And the left controls from the standpoint of the bureaucracy and, between with the power of the teachers' unions over school boards and even within schools itself. I mean, you're going to police these guys, but, the criminals are always going to find a way to get around the cops, right? And I don't know, without imposing market forces on that and being able to break it that way, that you're ever going to completely fix this. I mean, I'm sure you saw this on election night in Virginia. As McAuliffe was getting beat, it was almost like the word came down from the DNC, and every one of their pundits on cable news, and yesterday was all that, talking about how critical race theory doesn't actually exist.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Which is, you're talking about gaslighting. It's breathtaking.
Well, right. So, and where the defund the police cost people their positions in places like Seattle with the city attorney's race or the ballot question in Minneapolis, the response is, oh really? You want us to burn down more police precincts? That was the response from the professional agitators in places like Minneapolis. So, if support for law enforcement, K through 12 curriculum, and tax and spend policy, that's always relevant. I mean, if the landscape doesn't change because the Democrat Socialists refuse to pivot at all between now and next year, then I think we will have a replay of what you saw in Virginia and New Jersey.
Oh, I just don't think they can. I mean, I think the special interests that have pushed these policies on that party, are the people who fund the Democrat Party. I mean, they're not, I mean, Terry McAuliffe was getting beat on the education issue, right? That was what had turned that race. And so his last rally in Virginia, he gave the podium to Randy Weingarten.
Right.
And if you saw the results of that, I mean, you would think that Randy Weingarten would never be at the podium for a Democrat candidate ever again. I mean, it was like the worst speech of all time. But I mean, nobody's going to tell Randy Weingarten she can't speak at their rally because, the teachers' unions, between Planned Parenthood and the teachers' unions, I don't know that they would have a party if those guys didn't.
Yeah, and then Terry stepped in it too by saying we need minority teachers. We have too many white teachers here in Virginia. I don't think that.
And they had internal polling. I mean, they knew that was not a winner, but. You have to pay off your special interest above all. And those people are not going to let the Democrats, moderate their message or any of that. I mean, they can't afford it. And, so it's more cowbell is how this thing is going to play out. And I just don't know if they're set up to fix it. I mean, I'm getting the DNC's emails with their press statements that they put out 1 million times a day. And I mean, these people are absolutely oblivious to what's going on out there because, they live in this little Twitter bubble. And, they believe everything the Twitter algorithms tell them is a thing. And, they've lost the ability to persuade anybody. So they just spout talking points. And if those don't work, then, look out.
He is Scott McKay, publisher at the Hayride, contributor to the American Spectator as well. Scott, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
You guys have a great day.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line. Now let's head into the newsroom. Here is Mike Scott.
33 degrees at 7:33. The House may vote later today on President Biden's